Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the greatest show in Austin, Texas.
Gosh, have we got that title already, brother?
We created an award ceremony and we won.
For ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so
and we invited ourselves and we dressed up, and it was, people at home think that's weird, but that's what we like to do. And we awarded ourselves a trophy.
Hey, there we are. The greatest show in Austin,
That's
Texas.
right. We beat out our competitors who were Banjo and Baby. That's little dogs.
Go. Yeah, they had. Yeah, they
didn't stand a chance because they can't even talk. So.
But they did give us a run for our money. You know,
it was close. It was close. The voting in the house was close. You know, between your family and mine, they were. It was tough. We won by one vote.
One vote set us apart. So
that's right.
Paranormal Roundtable. Yeah, that's the show now.
Greatest show.
That's the show.
People are like, "Oh, you were running against little dogs. So what? We still won. Yeah. Winning is everything, dude."
Exactly.
That's it.
If you're not first, you're last.
That's right.
And in that running, it's what it was.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, that brings us into our show today.
Now, we're winning, especially who we're going to have today on the show.
He's a winner. I like the guy. He's got several books. He's a researcher.
Accomplished researcher.
Very
accomplished
good.
writer.
Been on TV. His name is Ken Gerhard.
Yeah. Everybody go back and listen to that part again. Ken Gerhard, or I'll say it, but yeah, Ken is going to be on the show with us today.
Good guy. I like Ken a lot. I've been watching him and his research for a long time.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy it. You know, just don't even know how to explain it other than maybe the words will come to me later on how to explain how I view his style of work and how he goes about doing it. But, you know, before we get into the interview and everything else.
Plug the email.
Yeah, we got to get the email to everybody.
DosWolfman88@gmail.com and
wolfandsal@gmail.com. Send us your stories.
Send us your stories, or you can just continue to ignore that and private message me until my phone explodes. Okay.
Awesome. But hey, folks, we want to hear your stories. Send them in to us. We love hearing it. So, and again, unfortunately, I will throw this out. You know, we are a little backlogged right now because it's just me and Wolf doing a lot of the email and answering stories. But hey, guess what? That's still not deterring us. We are still staying in the fight, and we are determined to go through every story that's sent to us.
And we have some people that are trying to contact you guys. I know you've used the words like gross and creepy, and that would be Tony. We are trying. I'm just kidding, Tony. They just said they don't trust you. But anyways, we're trying to get to your stories, folks. Let's get right into it with Ken.
Yeah. So with that being said, let's bring on Ken.
Okay. So Ken, you are what I would say like one of my favorite researchers. You research cryptids and you write books, and I've seen you on TV. I've seen you on TV like several times, and you just recently wrote a book.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's definitely a pleasure and an honor to be here with you, man.
Oh, man, the honors are all mine.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, my new book is called The Essential Guide to Bigfoot, and it's literally within days of release. So we're close, but it should be coming out soon. And it's the reason I wrote the book is because I'm finding that I'm spending a lot of my time sort of dealing with people that have found things on the internet that are, you know, either misrepresentations or misleading or just, you know, straight up falsehoods. So there's just so much misinformation out there with regard to the subject of Bigfoot. Now, granted, about 80 to 82% of the population, general population, does not believe in Bigfoot. So that, you know, and I understand that the vast majority of people don't. But for the, you know, 18 to 20% of people that do, and, you know, those people have often read a lot of books and, you know, maybe have gotten better information, there's a lot of evidence, you know, that would support the existence of these things, as amazing as that sounds. So there's a lot of evidence that people aren't aware of. Of course, there's, you know, to counter that, of course, there are a lot of hoaxes and videos and things that are dubious, and those are widely disseminated on the internet. So that's what a lot of people come across, and that's kind of coloring, you know, the public's perception of the subject of Bigfoot, if you will. So I found myself in a good position in terms of, you know, I've been investigating Bigfoot pretty much my whole life. Ever since I was a little kid, I've been reading every book on the subject, and I got into field research at a young age. I've worked with most of the leading Bigfoot investigators in the field, and still have relationships with them. And I'm also in touch with some of the old school Bigfoot researchers. This research has been going on since the 1950s and even before. So yeah, the book is kind of a primer. It's got a lot of information in kind of easy to read format, but it's technical at times, because I like to get into the biology of Bigfoot, the physical characteristics, the ecology, and so on and so forth. But there's also a lot of the history and trying to dispel again some of the myths. And I also have a number of eyewitness accounts that are pretty credible. And also information about my own personal investigations and field research, which have ranged from Alaska all the way down to Central America and all over the United States. So
the last book I read of yours was A Menagerie of Mysterious Beasts, and I liked that book. It was really good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that was a good one. And then I read Encounters with Flying Humanoids. Now, you're from Texas, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
I got here as quick as I could, which was about 30 some years ago, maybe closer to 40 now.
And so
I'm from Texas.
Definitely
Live in San Antonio at the moment.
And so, okay, so I one of the things I just recently did an episode about Bigfoot on the show, and when we posted it in the groups on Facebook, one of the things I noticed was like the people, the UFO community, the ghost community, if you will, and like even some of the people who believe in Dogman, they're not all like on the same page. They don't really like believe in necessarily in Bigfoot. They're like making jokes, and there were people that were like making comments. And that's one of the things that because I do a show about the paranormal, I think it's all related in some way or another. But a lot of people don't agree with that. They don't seem to believe that there's a connection to any of it. But I believe, at least as far as my two favorite cryptids, which are Dogman and Bigfoot, I think they share a lot of territory. I think they share a lot of the same environment. And I don't know how you feel about that, but do you, as a researcher in the Bigfoot, as far as Bigfoot goes, do you agree with that? Do you think that Bigfoot and Dogman like live in the same areas?
Well, first of all, I have to admit that, I have certainly dealt with some sort of paranormal and supernatural subjects, such as the flying humanoids, which I think are squarely paranormal and supernatural. And my own opinion, Dogman goes in that category as well. I don't view it as a real flesh and blood animal. I think it's something supernatural, some type of manifestation or something. It just does, it breaks all the rules of biology in the natural world, whereas Bigfoot does not. Bigfoot fits squarely and neatly into the natural world. It fits neatly into the human evolutionary tree. And so, I look at these things kind of in different ways. But as a traditional cryptozoologist, and I have this is a sociological observation more than anything else. Obviously these are all highly controversial subjects. They're great, enduring mysteries. These things tend to touch us on a very, we connect with these things on a very intense level in some ways, and different people do that differently. Now, we all have different biases, right? Either consciously or unconsciously, every human on the earth has biases, and whether they want to admit that or not. And those biases have often been, created by filters, and their upbringing, and how they were raised, and what they've been exposed to, and cultural influences. So there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone's different. That's great. But in my own experience, everybody that I've talked to that immediately, I should say, considers Bigfoot to be something paranormal, supernatural, or even extraterrestrial, all of those people are generally people that are either coming from the paranormal field or the UFO field. So they already have a bias towards the paranormal, towards UFOs. So Bigfoot fits neatly into their comfort zone. So they want to drag it in and say, okay, well, yeah, Bigfoot, maybe that's paranormal or, interdimensional. So it's possible. I mean, I won't say, there's nothing that's impossible. I mean, I'm an open-minded person. But again, the evidence for Bigfoot is very compelling. There's physical evidence. There's a number of levels of evidence that make Bigfoot very compelling as a zoological possibility. But I think things like Dogman and Mothman and some of those things may exist. But again, I personally see them in the paranormal or the supernatural realm.
Yeah. One of the things I was going to talk to you about, I remember watching a show, and I can't remember what channel it was. I've seen you on TV a few times. I know that I watched a show one time a while back that you were doing an investigation into the Chupacabra.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I remember is, like, you know, at the end, the conclusion, there was like this, these people in Mexico, I guess, they were telling you they had one, but it was like, would it look like a goat or something like that?
It was a deformed baby goat. Mm-hmm.
Deformed baby goat. I remember that. And I remember thinking, you know, that is kind of typical of, you know, people that they have something they don't understand, or they don't, you know, and they just throw it under the category of it's being a supernatural thing or something. And that happens a lot. I think a lot of times there's a lot of debate about this Dogman, and I don't even like the term Dogman. I've stated that before on my show and in interviews I've done. I saw one when I was 15 in my hometown. I never saw it again, but the one thing that I remember is it looked flesh and blood to me. But there is a lot of people who are very hostile toward the idea that it is anything other than a flesh and blood creature, much like Bigfoot. And I don't agree with that. I think that some of the things that other reports that I've gotten, and I've gotten a lot of them from various people, that these things they do things that are not natural. They just appear and they disappear. That didn't happen to me and the friend that I was with, but that also sometimes seems to be the case with Bigfoot. People claiming that they do things and that are not of the natural order, like the natural realm. I do personally believe that there is a flesh and blood creature, Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, and I think that there's a flesh and blood creature, Dogman. But I also think that there's something else going on with Dogman in particular. I think that there's something supernatural. I think there's something, I don't know if you want to call it a skinwalker or something that and it gives off something, somewhat of an evil vibe. That's just my opinion on that. And I've always wondered, like, you go out in the field and you do research. You know, I always wondered if maybe there was a connection between that and then, like, you know, like Bigfoot, Dogman, if there's like if they're interdimensional, or if there's something that they do that's natural to them that looks unnatural to us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So again, one of the common misconceptions is that there are all these paranormal, supernatural elements attached to the Bigfoot phenomenon. That's not actually true if you look at the evidence. 99.9% of Bigfoot sightings, I was driving down the road, this thing like an ape was walking on its hind legs, it walked across the road, it disappeared on the other side. Or I was walking through the woods, I saw this thing, it started walking away from me, it made a noise. You know, that's none of that stuff indicates, you know, now the weird things are, and you know, paranormal people always point to this quite fairly, well, how come we haven't found a body? How come there are no remains? But in terms of accounts of them like vanishing into thin air or, you know, things like that, you know, literally, again, there are several thousand Bigfoot sightings that have been documented. And that, you know, you could probably throw all those paranormal type sightings into a box. You know, it just doesn't, it's not big enough to be relevant in terms of evidence. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And I'm not trying to be elitist about that. These are facts, you know. So again, it's a perception. Oh, Bigfoot. Yeah, we can't find it. Which is a great question. Why can't we find? We haven't found a body. Some people say they've shot them and it didn't hurt them, so therefore it's paranormal. So, you know, again, I'm hoping to clear the air on that because I think that Bigfoot squarely fits in the natural world. But again, Dogman, and you brought up a good point. You know, a lot of people that have seen Dogman and stuff, it is a very real experience. It seems like a physical thing. There are often physical things left behind, like scratch marks on cars and things like that. And also the behavior of the Dogman is, as you said, very aggressive. You know, people often report that they're, you know, these things, that the Dogman will chase them or attack, you know, attacking people, attacking property. So very, very non-typical of a natural animal. behavior, whereas Bigfoot, it's the opposite. It ran away, it crossed the road, it disappeared, it walked away. It's very rare that we have accounts of aggressive behavior by Bigfoot. Those are fleeting. Now, in terms of the physical properties, and I don't pretend to be a paranormal supernatural investigator. That's not my wheelhouse. But my understanding from my colleagues in the paranormal is that some people claim that they've seen full body apparitions that did not look amorphic and transparent, and they looked solid. I've had several ghost investigators. No, this thing looked like a person was standing right there. It had it didn't look what you would think of in a ghost in terms of kind of vague or unclear. And then also ghosts can also have a physical presence, right? They can make things. They scratch people. They tap people in the shoulder. Something falls off the shelf. So that is a physical, that's a physical thing that's happening. And you can't deny that. It's like, okay, that just happened in our reality. So, I think whatever these dogman things are, I don't think it's born and evolved on the planet. I don't think it was created in a lab, but I do think it has a physical presence. And when they manifest, they are physically here, in our reality. People see them as real physical things. But, I guess it's just the origin that's in question, right? Where do these things come from?
Or just what they are. I mean, the thing is, in my hometown, there are no legends or stories of Bigfoot, but there were stories of the Cadejo or the Hombre Lobo. And from the Latino community there, because I'm actually of mixed origin, I'm Hispanic and white. And on my mom's side, I was told many times about stories of these, the Hombre Lobo. My tia used to always warn me about going out at night, and I thought it was just a bunch of bull until I actually saw one. And then a distant cousin of mine saw one 2 months later, and actually did I went over her encounter on Dogman Encounters. I've been on that show many times. I took a lot of reports, started out just doing reports locally, and then it just expanded, people giving me their accounts, and I just went from there. But for years and years, I was trying to unlock the mystery of what it was that I saw, and never have seen it again. But I've talked to a lot of people who have, and it runs the gamut from just completely flesh and blood to something ethereal. And now I've lived in a house that had a lot of paranormal activity. I lived there for 10 years, and I talk about it on one of the episodes on the show, and it was a completely different ball of wax. I didn't get the feeling from this dogman that I saw, if you want to call it that. It just looked like a werewolf to me, if you want to call it something.
Sure.
And I didn't get the feeling that it was supernatural. But there's so many arguments that happen in these groups. I see it all the time. People are like, "Oh, it's a flesh and blood creature," and they're real hostile toward the idea that it might not be. And then of course the Bigfoot thing. I believe that Bigfoot is flesh and blood. Like if you had to say choose a side, I would say flesh and blood. I think there's a lot of accounts that you just can't dismiss it. There's so many. I know that I was reading one author. I was reading her book, and there was what was essentially a Bigfoot encounter in the book about the Dogman, and it was these people who they were driving along and they saw it right in the same area as the Dogman. So then you start thinking maybe there's a misidentification in some cases. You can't really tell one way or the other, but I do believe
in some cases maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I think their territories overlap. Now, you being from, you live in San Antonio, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you're familiar with the Devil's Backbone? I don't know if you know that area.
I have not been to the area. I've heard of it.
Yeah. It's right outside of San Marcos, going from San Marcos to Blanco, and then cuts down into Wimberley, almost like a triangle. That area right there, I got some reports, started out with some friends that a buddy of mine used to work with. And I just started going out there, and talking to people. And there are two, this is kind of odd. I've noticed it on one side of the Devil's Backbone is Sasquatch. I don't get any Dogman stories out of that area. But then on the other side of that area, I get Dogman. like they live next to each other, but it's kind of like they don't go into each other's territory. Like one side is like strictly Bigfoot, and the other side is Dogman. I think that's interesting. I think that they, because I do believe that there are some physical beings, and they're living in two different, sections of the same territory. And I think that they know that, and they and that's just my opinion. But in your research, you have found, like you were saying, like predominantly it is a flesh and blood creature. And you've done a lot of research here in Texas, and you have not found like reports of Dogman in the same areas as Bigfoot, or I mean, like, how does that work? Have you covered Dogman reports in the same area?
Well, admittedly, I don't do a lot of Dogman research. I mean, I find it fascinating, but it's just not, I tend to be more of a traditional cryptozoologist. So traditional, which we're kind of becoming a dying breed, but traditional cryptozoology is based on zoology. So it's really, you're looking for unknown animals. And again, I'm firmly convinced that Dogman is not something I could go out and track in the woods, that I could lay out a bait and call it in. And it's something that appears and vanishes, and we can only speculate perhaps as far as how that happens. But, you made points earlier. I mean, there are werewolf legends, and, let's be fair. Dogman is werewolf. I know a lot of people like to argue about that. No, it's different. It's like, look, werewolf means man in German, and wolf. So it's like man and wolf, man and dog. And, a dog and a wolf are genetically very close. They can breed all the time. They're basically subspecies. So it's not, so anyways, werewolf legends are prevalent all over the world, wherever you have wolves, throughout Europe and Asia. And of course, lately, the Dogman thing, I get reports. I do get some reports from researchers in Australia and South America and other places around the world, Africa now. So, the Dogman is making its presence known. But again, talking about origins, and this is my perspective, scientifically speaking, primates, which of course includes humans, and canids, dogs, carnivores, diverged from a common ancestor at least 35 million years ago. We went in radically different directions. One creature developed a quadrupedal gait, 4 legs, and it's built this way, and it does this, and primates eventually turned into humans. The other, So the thought that, how would a Dogman exist? I mean, what are we talking about? A dog that stands upright? Again, 30 million years of evolution pushed dogs in the other direction. So suddenly a dog can't just decide it's going to stand upright. So, and there can't be any type of hybrid situation either. So, I mean, it's just, scientifically, it's hard to wrap your head around. And again, I'm not poo-pooing the Dogman phenomenon. It's real. People are having these experiences. They're leaving behind physical evidence. So I view it as different from Bigfoot. And, it is interesting that people are kind of conflating the two and somehow, trying to draw comparisons, but they're both big and hairy, and they walk on 2 legs. So that's a pretty big coincidence right there, I guess. So.
Yeah, I got a friend who, when I introduced him, because he's into Bigfoot, and he lives up in Fort Worth, and when I was hanging out with him one time, and we were talking about the whole Bigfoot, Dogman. And one of the things that he said the same thing, like it's hard for him to wrap his mind around what a werewolf Dogman could be. He's like, I can see a Bigfoot. This were his exact words. I can see a Bigfoot evolutionarily, but how does a Dogman or werewolf fit in? And one of the things that he brought up was like, he started doing his own kind of research, whatever. And some people he thinks are misidentifying. And I think that's possible too. Because I've heard stories of Bigfoot that have almost like a snout, and they have normal legs. But one of the things
human-looking type legs.
Yeah, human-looking type legs. One of the things, and Sal, we get reports mostly here in Texas of the backward bent legs,
dog style
legs. We get a lot of those, and I don't really get many reports of them looking like recently there was we did a show where this woman was in her car and two of these dogman looking creatures were like ping-ponging her car back and forth, and that's a report that we got. But what's crazy is like she described them as looking almost like gorillas with snouts.
I guess that would fall into the category of if you're thinking about the whole animal kingdom, something more along the lines of a baboon, because that's
another thing I was going to talk to you about, Ken, because we got a story out of Mason County, Texas, where the things looked like, I think they're giant baboons. The kids were saying that they were like dog-like, but when you look at a baboon, and if it was like some sort of like the Dinopithecus, if you look at like the ancient,
oh yeah.
It
looks. In fact, I did a sketch on my website one time where I showed a Dinopithecus next to a Dogman sketch, and they were like, almost except for the tail, it was almost like a perfect overlay.
That's what we thought, because because me and Sal, we were trying to figure out what it was, so we went back and we just researched everything we could, and we kept thinking, it sounds like a baboon, so we just kept on looking, and then we trying to compare the comparisons, trying to what they told us. And it had to be. I mean, to me, that's what it was. I mean, when I went back and I talked to, of course, we talked to two different witnesses, but one of them was more like, no, it had more like a wolf's head. But the other guy who I think got a better look at it, got a better vantage point look at it, he said that could be what it was. I mean, the tail even was kind of like, I don't know what they're doing roaming around the Texas country. So Texas is a big state. So, there's all kinds of weird stuff.
People, I guarantee you there are people in Texas that have baboons on their property. I don't, I get those accounts where, we have, there are populations of feral monkeys in Texas. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh, yeah.
South Texas, I believe.
Yeah, South Texas. And there's one that was actually shot up in Coleman, Texas. Years ago, a hunter shot a big monkey up there that was running around in the woods. So they do get out there. There are invasive things out there, but it would be hard to relate the baboon type sightings to the entire Dogman phenomenon, since it's all over the place. And now you said something interesting about the backwards pointing legs, and I've heard that before. But again, from a biological perspective, that doesn't make sense. What other two-legged animal can you think of whose legs are not straight down below them for the most part? Because they have to support the full weight of the body. So there'd be no advantage in having backwards pointing legs if you were an upright walking animal.
If you're walking all the time on two legs. Yeah.
That said, and again, there's all these interesting aspects to the Dogman phenomenon. Linda Godfrey and others have pointed out to me that there are many accounts of Dogman going down on all fours and then also going up. So that makes a little more sense, I guess.
It's kind of like we're of the opinion, Ken, that if you compare the Sasquatch to the Dogman, we'd say we like to think in terms of the Sasquatch feel more comfortable upright, but they will get down on all fours to scurry out of the area, do whatever they got to do. And the Dogman is kind of vice versa. They will prefer to stay on all fours, but if they need to scurry out of the area, it's not beyond them to get on two legs and get out of the area as fast as possible, if that's what they deem they need to do at that point in time or given the situation. So, but it's really interesting. I was going to go back really quick on, you mentioned the canid and the human origins, where that common ancestor 35 million years ago. And I do give a lot of credence to the misidentification. There are some out there that believe that the misidentification is some type of a baboon, because the baboon is kind of an oddball within the primate world. And when you think of in the form of monkeys, chimps, gorillas, now granted, they're not part of the great apes.
Baboons have the muzzle.
But they have that muzzle. And so that
large canine thing.
Yes. And so, I just find it interesting. And some of the people that see these creatures some of them give you those basic, I guess you could say that basic identification, but very few of them sit down and will actually describe it in detail and can tell you the difference between a baboon and or a wolf. And, makes you think the ones that describe a very wolf or a creature that resembles the quintessential werewolf, for example, like on that movie series Underworld or
Van Helsing.
Van Helsing, yes. And, those things are just really, they're mind-boggling in my opinion.
Yeah, and that may be another issue with another reason I lean towards a kind of a supernatural origin for Dogman is the variety of physical descriptions. I mean, they're a little bit, different, or I guess there's more variety or more diversity within the description. But there's something else too, which you brought up a great theory there in terms of the giant baboon. A lot of creatures, cryptids, are composite identity, meaning that you do, of course, have some type of animal or something at the root of it, but you also have misidentifications of known animals, like you said. Like in some cases, bears or coyotes can often hop on their hind legs and, things like that. It may not make up a large percentage of the sightings, but, some of them. And also, I hate to go here, but, a lot of people, and I've done a lot of study for my new Bigfoot book. I interviewed a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists and sociologists and different people. There are a lot of cultural reasons that, people might, for whatever reason, wishful thinking or, some type of clinical issue or, whatever, see a dog man or think they see a dog man or piece the way their brain pieces it together, it was a dog man, So I think some of that has probably had an influence. And that's true for Bigfoot as well. Not every Bigfoot sighting is actually a Bigfoot. People are probably seeing other things at times. Now, the one thing I like to bring out, you guys have been wanting to seemingly bridge that gap. Have you ever heard of the Horizon City monster, the Bigfoot that's been sighted out near El Paso? Are you familiar with that case?
I've not heard it called by that name. I've heard of some stories from that particular area. One story was, just to make it real quick, it was an older gentleman, a young Sasquatch. He was out watering his garden. Young Sasquatch was in the midst of it. He saw it, got surprised, and hosed down that young Sasquatch with his, with the water hose. And of course, the young one took off. And then, of course, about give it 6 to 9 months later, this older gentleman who lived out in the boonies, he was like a rancher, never had to worry about locking his door. One night, he wakes up to a horrible stench, and when he looks up, there is this Sasquatch standing over him, and it proceeded to pummel him and throw him around like a rag doll. Lost a few digits and so on and so forth. And that's the story that I heard. And it was, I heard
that happened out there. I thought that was
out in the El
East
Paso
Texas.
area. It was in the El Paso area. So that's about all I've heard as far as a lot of encounters out in that particular area. There's a lot more to that story. And there's a gentleman named T.W. Youngs who told that story. And I believe he's got firsthand involvement / witness of that particular story, or all the details involving that story. So it was really, really interesting.
Is that what you're talking about, Ken?
Well, the Horizon City monster is a Bigfoot type creature that's been reported around Horizon City, which is a suburb of El Paso. The sightings go back to the 1970s, and more recently in the 1990s, there was a woman that had a sighting, pretty good daytime sighting. And interestingly enough, her description, as well as some of the descriptions from the 70s, described a Bigfoot, but they said that it had a very dog-like, kind of a protruding dog-like jaw, what we call prognatism, and also very pointy ears. So, if you look it up online and look at some of the sketches, and it's just, I won't say it's a dog man, but it's the most canine-looking Bigfoot, because of the pointy ears and kind of the protruding jaw, and I guess maybe pronounced canine teeth too. At least in terms of all the Bigfoot accounts that I've investigated through the years, it could almost be called a werewolf, more than any other type of Bigfoot. So there's a possible that if Bigfoot exists, maybe there are subspecies or, different variations. And that's, I'm sure you guys have heard that as a theory in the Dogman world. Well, it's a different type of Bigfoot. It's a subspecies that looks kind of wolf-like for whatever reason, but who knows?
Anytime we get reports of something, oh, I see it. Okay, we just looked it up right now. Tony just brought up a picture of it. Thank you, Tony. That looks kind of like Anthony. If you didn't shave, that's how you'd look. It's my nephew. Yeah, that is definitely that could, because it's got that you see it, Sal? Kind of a protruding muzzle looking.
Yeah,
thing.
I see that. It's very.
Witnesses described that, and the pointy ears were very noticeable too, supposedly. So those are two features that would make you think wolf or dog, probably.
I could see that, but it's really interesting as far as the sketch is concerned. It makes you wonder. I guess again, the human memory is or the human recollection of memories is really tough to get around. It's not the most reliable thing in court, believe it or not, folks.
That's true.
But it could have scared a lot of those people talking about the pointy ears.
Well, have you ever noticed how like some of the stories? Okay, now today we were just talking about the church that we were talking about, Sal, and they said that the dogman looking creatures came out of a well. Okay, have you ever noticed how some of these dogmen can climb trees very well? Almost like a primate type like talent, you wouldn't attribute that to a dog. Dogs or wolves themselves aren't climbers at all. And so there would, to me, have to be some sort of primate element to these things for them to be able to climb trees, to move the way they do. It's almost very primate-like at times. And we do get descriptions of them being primate with like dog heads. I mean, they just the way they describe them, the way they move, everything.
Now, I've seen a few photos of, these were, the photos of the claims is that these photos were of dog men, and I've seen them. And I'm quite an avid watcher of plenty of YouTube videos. I don't discriminate on whose channel I go to. I do watch each video, take everything with a grain of salt. But some of these pictures, some you can tell somebody's been messing with, or they were faked, somebody in a costume, et cetera, et cetera. But the ones I've seen, I saw this one creature looked very, very canid, and it had the long ears. I believe I showed you that picture.
Yeah, you showed me that. Well, what about the Beast of Seven Shoots picture?
Yeah, that one.
Holding something in its arms.
Yeah, to me, the Beast of Seven Shoots photograph is of a quintessential, as far as the face and head's concerned, baboon. I think baboon, giant baboon.
But it's standing up. It looks like it's standing straight up. Though.
Yeah, it's standing upright.
I mean, you could look at that, and it looks like a Bigfoot, but it has like a baboon type head.
What's your take on that, Ken?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the photo. Of course, it's been disseminated for a long time. Yeah, it looks, it definitely has a muzzle. I mean, now it looks tall, of course, and that's the perception, but it's just so hard to. And I know that photo watching has become kind of a popular thing, especially with everyone's got their mobile device. But sadly, it's just gotten to the point where I just don't put much, into photographic evidence of any kind, because it's either too vague and there's just not enough data there to make any type of determination, which is, I think, what we're talking about here. Or if it's too good to be true, then it's, probably some type of CGI or Photoshop type gaffe. So, I'm not trying to come off as negative, but we're literally, at least in terms of Bigfoot, which is what I'm mainly focused on at this point. There's no way we'll ever prove that Bigfoot's real with a video, unless, and it's probably still not going to be the case, unless the video was just so literally jaw-dropping that you fell out of your chair when you looked at it and said, "Oh my God." And even then, people would say, "Well, that's a special effects or whatever." So
nobody's going to believe it. Yeah,
yeah. It's kind of like the PG
and everyone's
film.
got a different, and everyone's got a different perspective. My thing is trying to find proof. I mean, that's kind of where my passion lies, and I don't think it's going to be found via photographs or videos at this point.
Yeah, because you can't. No, even if someone got a clear photo, like you said, they're going to be like, "That's fake." Because there's some people that are going to say that no matter what. I mean, I'm kind of the opposite of Sal. I don't really do a lot of looking at videos on YouTube. I don't listen to a lot of shows. Most of what I do, I spend a lot of time, I do two things in my life. One is work, and the other is fielding reports. That's kind of what I do. That's my thing. Sal does a lot of the research into the areas where we get reports, and then I take the reports and we go over them, and we're kind of like, what do you think of this? If it sounds like something we could put on the show, but you can't really, all you can do is go by what people tell you. There's, and we try to look for threads, as we call it.
Yeah.
Like if we get a report that's kind of an oddball report about something, I just kind of file it away. I literally put it in the file
on its own little shelf and leave it there for a while
until we find something that's very similar, like the whole pterodactyl.
Yes, the pterodactyl.
Yeah, we got a couple of reports of these things down in South Texas a long time ago. I heard a story about one. Well, I had nowhere to put it. So, but then recently we got a couple others, and then so then you're going like, okay, there's a thread now, and like the Bigfoot thing. Obviously, the big thicket. East Texas, people do not realize how massive Texas is and how
thick it is down there.
Thick it is. In the East, it's pretty much jungle. It's considered jungle because it's so thick, especially near Caddo Lake or whatever, Lake Caddo.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at like all the reports you get out of there. Well, a lot of these reports you get of the Bigfoot, they sound similar in different regions. Like you'll get different colors. So obviously, there's something to it. There's certain areas of Louisiana, they'll report like a reddish brown type color to the Bigfoot, and then there's different ones like near San Antonio. We heard 2 or 3 out of that area.
The Converse monster, I believe, or
Converse. That's a werewolf.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
No,
Converse
I was talking. We were talking just the other day on the show. We were talking about the area near the Air Force Base. I believe it was Kelly Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I investigated that. I've investigated the sightings near Kelly, so I've been to that location.
Oh, and what did you now tell us about that?
In August of 1976, and the old Kelly Air Force Base there, it's a pretty, even though it's within San Antonio city limits and really within the city, there's a lot of wooded area out there because, obviously it's military, so they're using it for whatever. Right on the edge of that, there's a kind of a neighborhood, and a gentleman named Ed Olivari, one morning, he heard his dog barking about 7 o'clock. He went outside, looked over his fence, and he saw a large brown animal on the ground. And there's some railroad tracks right there behind his property. And just then the railroad train started coming, and it rose up. And according to Ed, it was a 7-foot-tall Bigfoot, and it strode off into the woods. The very next morning, his next-door neighbor, an older lady named Rose Medina, heard her dog barking at about 4 in the morning, and she looked out her back window and claims that she saw what we'll call a Littlefoot because it looked just like a Bigfoot, but it was only about 4 feet tall, maybe. She said it was about the size of a 9-year-old kid. And bless her heart, she opened her window and shooed at it, and it ran away. So at that point, Ed heard about her sighting, and he postulated, not a bad theory, well, there must be a female Bigfoot and her offspring moving through our neighborhood. So he went out in the woods and claimed he found some footprints. Those were looked at by a game warden that just kind of shrugged his shoulders. There was a 200-pound manhole, it was probably more than 200 pounds, enormous manhole cover that got lifted off and moved mysteriously. There were some mangled cats that were found in the property. And then there's one third vaguer sighting that I heard about from a lady who said that she was walking home from a laundromat and a Bigfoot jumped out of the bushes out of there. So that all happened within a few days back in 1976. There have not been, to my knowledge, any subsequent sightings in that area. But I did go out to the location. I located the property. Of course, knew people living in the neighborhood, but some people had heard of the stories. The manhole cover we found. But, I took some pictures, and there are some, decent amounts of brush surrounding that area. So there are some wooded areas. So, I guess you could theorize that, perhaps there was a Bigfoot or a couple of Bigfoots moving through that area temporarily back in 1976, but nothing since that I'm aware of.
That's really interesting, Ken, because my question to that was when you went and did your investigation, and you got to take into consideration the urban sprawl, for lack of better words. Do you think that it's possible that there may some some may still be coming around through that area, or would it be just something that if they did, it would be a very unusual thing? Now, of course, in today's world, because of all the urban sprawl.
That's a good question. Now, I find it strange that a Bigfoot would be sighted anywhere near urban sprawl. I was recently talking to Cliff Barrickman, for most people know from the show Finding Bigfoot, and he's convinced that they do come very close, much closer to urban areas than we would ever realize. So if Bigfoot exists and we haven't been able to find it, the only explanation for that is that it's very rare and that it has adapted behavior patterns specifically to avoid humans. So it recognizes that humans are its greatest threat. We're in direct competition. And if they're intelligent enough to realize that, then the behavior patterns they may have adapted would include living in the areas we don't go, so in the most remote wilderness areas, but perhaps also somewhat being somewhat nomadic and moving around when they have to, and just being on the move all the time. And of course, there's also a lot of evidence that they're nocturnal, primarily, not always, but primarily nocturnal. Coming out at night when humans typically are asleep. So if you take all that into consideration, then theoretically, a Bigfoot that was living in a remote wilderness area got pushed out for whatever reason, deforestation, a fire, a hurricane, and moved or had to move to a different area, then it might move closer to an urban area than you would expect, but still remaining in the woods as much as possible. And of course, it's all speculation, but I mean, that would be the only reason that I would expect to have a Bigfoot anywhere near an urban area, is if it was, being forced to move or it was on the move somewhere. It certainly would not make its home there. That wouldn't make sense.
Well, let me ask you a question, Ken. Do you think that now that everywhere you go, out in the country, there's a Walmart or a Sonic that just pop up everywhere?
That urban sprawl.
That
reaching
maybe
out in places it never did before.
Yeah. So maybe a lot of the Bigfoots have just become like everyone else, suburbanites, and they're just going to be where it's convenient. Because I actually fielded a report of a Bigfoot at the Sonic ordering a coney. I'm just kidding. I'm joking. I'm just kidding.
No, on a serious note, mentioning the adaptation of patterns and all this, I've always been of the, and of course it's not set in stone because we really don't know what these creatures really do, how their family structure is set up exactly. And so unfortunately we're at the stage in this type of research, and just like the Eastern people were in the United States 100 to 200 years ago, when they would hear about the quote unquote savage Indians out in the West, they heard everything under the sun about them and how they were savages or this and all that, but they really couldn't prove anything unless they went out there and interacted with them. And then most of the time that wasn't the case. They were just getting stories from some reporters who went out there and talked to some people, and then they'd glamorize the story and send it back. So they thought they were subhuman, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm getting at is we will probably never know. And then, of course, disclosure, et cetera, because there are many people out there who believe the government is well aware of what's going on with these creatures. And to keep everything on the down low, well, many believe that there is a task force that operate under the guise of the government, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that do you think it would be out of character for these creatures to be spotted in and around suburban areas if they were older, maybe can't hunt that well, or female, and then of course trash and everything else?
Yeah, you hear about them going through garbage.
So would that sound like it's something out of the question?
Yeah, those are good questions. As far as going through the trash, there's a lot of evidence that Bigfoot is a generalist omnivore, basically an opportunistic omnivore, just like a bear. So yes, I could see a Bigfoot going to a trash dumpster if it were, in fact, there have been Bigfoot sighted around dumpsters and grease traps and things. So that makes sense. As far as on the go, I think it's the opposite, actually. And the reason, if you use, for example, and this is all wild speculation, but in the primate world, and let's use gorilla hierarchy, I think that's the best example. Gorillas live in small groups that are dominated by an alpha male, and he's got several wives, if you will, a harem, and the children and of all of his unions, and sometimes there's a younger male. But at some point when the younger males start to get too old and big, and they're a challenge to the alpha male, he pushes them out of the group. And then they have to go in search of another group that they can either challenge a male that's dying or, take over and establish themselves. So the long-standing theory in the Bigfoot world, and this has been proposed by anthropologists, not just me, but is that the Bigfoots that are seen are mostly younger males that are rogues, that are on the move, looking for a new territory, looking for a family unit to take over or a mate or something like that. And my good friend Nick Redfern, who's a prolific author and investigator, mentioned to me one time that it would also make sense that the Bigfoots that are seen more often are the juveniles or the younger males because they're stupider and they're more prone to make a mistake than an older seasoned Bigfoot that knows how to stay hidden and how to stay away from humans. So it's almost like a teenager kind of screwing up, which I was a teenager once. I screwed up a lot, so I can totally relate to that.
It sounds like this is reminiscent. Oh, I'm sorry. This is reminiscent of what, the hunters talk about when you go out hunting for the big buck, the trophy buck. The seasoned hunters know to wait and let the first few bucks come out there and then wait around until the big buck finally decides to show himself because he allows the younger bucks to get out in the open before he does. So it sounds reminiscent of that.
Well,
it's a very common thing in nature, I'm sure.
One of the things too, Ken, that Sal is fond of talking about is how we are their TV, like we're their entertainment. They can, and I'm a firm believer that they can see us when we can't see them.
I agree.
Yep.
100%. I mean, I've been out in the bush, when I was younger. I traipsed around a lot out in the country until I saw a werewolf, and then I quit. But that actually was on the edge of town, But then I just thought, man, these things probably live out there, and so I kind of stayed away for a while. But starting to go back out now more, being more outdoorsy. But Bigfoot, I really believe that they like to people watch, and I think it's also for their survival that they have to keep an eye on us because they don't trust us. You got to know what your neighbors are doing if they're possible threat. You know what I mean?
I think they view us something along the lines of a hornet's nest. You kill one, you stir up the nest, and then you're going to have a whole slew of hornets coming after you. And I'm sure that they understand that that's not something they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point. I think there are a lot of accounts of them peeking out from behind trees. And I think they're also good at, and this goes back to the paranormal thing. We've kind of done a little full circle here. So I've had one experience. I've never seen Bigfoot with my own eyes. I'm convinced I've heard it on a couple of occasions. One time I was in an active area, sitting in a tree stand for hours on end, and I started hearing these loud bipedal footsteps crashing through the brush. Now, I couldn't see what it was, and I had a camera, so I was trying to get better positioning, but this thing sounded huge. And this was in an area that was known for a lot of Bigfoot sightings. So after a while, this was not a tree stand, but a free stand, and it was kind of old and rusty. And so when I decided finally, I was like, man, I got to get down out of this stand if I'm going to see this thing. So as I turned to get to the ladder, the chair creaked, and right at that exact instant, the footsteps stopped. And I eventually came down, looked through the woods where I thought I'd heard this thing, and it's like it seemed like it had vanished. And this is maybe why people have kind of this paranormal interpretation of, wow, this thing just vanished. I think that it basically it realized I was there and somehow either remained still enough, and this is another description of Bigfoot, I'm sure you guys have heard this, that they supposedly not only are they good at hiding behind trees, but they can also blend in and stand extremely still if they have to. And that's kind of one of their adaptations. It's like camouflage, And you mentioned deer a minute ago. I mean, how many times have you seen a deer walk by you into the woods and it's 5 feet away from you and it stops and you just can't see it?
Can't see it.
It's right there, but it's just so good at remaining still and blending in. So, so again, I think they do like to watch us. I think they like to observe us, and I think they're very good at obscuring themselves in the brush and you could probably be pretty close to a Bigfoot and not know it.
When I was a kid, Ken, we actually talk about this too on one of the shows. It was an episode of what I call near misses, I guess, for me, because I was with a group of people who were at Mount Bonnell in Austin who claimed they saw a UFO. I didn't see it. So I was with them, but I didn't see what they saw. And so there was a time when I was little, I think I was like 11 years old. I think I was 10 or 11. And there was a slumber party with a bunch of kids, and we all went out to my friend's ranch outside of town, and we were there for the weekend.
He was the well-off kid.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't.
The parents were the well-off, and so he
they
lived
had
a good life.
go-karts and all kinds of stuff. So we went out there, and the long story short, his brother and a couple of the older guys that were there, they weren't part of the summer party, but I guess he got a couple friends that came out there, and they were going to play a prank, and they were going to scare all the little kids that were all hanging around the den, and they were going to pop up in the window and wear like a steer's head with a duster on top of a duster. And that was supposed to be, and so I caught them talking about it, so they had to involve me in the prank. They said, okay, well, we'll use you to steer the kids into that room. And so what ended up happening was, in another area, a bunch of kids started screaming, and me and Shane, the guys that were involved in doing it, we were like, what's going on? So all these kids were in another area, and they started screaming, and they claimed to have seen the only thing that I can describe it as is a Bigfoot. The way they described it was like very ape-like, but I swear I was just in the next room, and when I ran into the other room to look to see what they were looking at, I didn't see it. So I missed it. But like a bunch of kids that were there, even we're all grown now, and they still, to this day, you could talk to any of them on Facebook. They're like, yeah, I saw a Bigfoot. Had a very ape-like face, and the way that it turned and left the premises, it was that close to me, and I ran in the next room, and I didn't see it. Like me and the other older kids did not see it at all. The older kids were teenagers that were going to try and scare the little kids, but which would have been my age. But I didn't see it, and it was so quick, and like it got away so fast. And from the way they described how it jumped over the barbed wire fence and was gone into the brush, I just can't imagine how fast that thing must have been and how quickly it must have gotten away for me to have missed it. But several guys that I went to school with all the way through high school and whatever, they to this day will tell you that when they were little kids, they saw a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot or what looks like a Bigfoot. And it always made me think, man, if they can be that quick and be that close to you and you can miss it, I mean, gosh, anything's possible.
Absolutely.
Here's another thought, Ken, and you can let me know what you think on it. I'm of the opinion, and again, like I said, I can't leave my, I guess you could say, positions set in stone because we really don't know everything there is to know about them, or officially we don't know anything of them. But since they're bipedal, and I've heard lots of researchers talk about how they'll get down in low crawl, military style, and it's very natural for them to do it. And sitting still is one of those things you practice and learn, as far as when you're in the military. I'm a career military man, retired and everything else, so I understand. So do you think that would be out of the realm of possibility?
No, like you said, if we can do it, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to do it if they felt they had to do it, So, no, I think that is, if they go down all fours, there are reports of that. And, they might also, as you said, get down and belly crawl or lay down flat in order to obscure themselves,
So Ken, you said you needed to be out of here by a certain time. Are you?
You still got a few moments, or do you have to go?
Yeah,
you need to
I'm afraid I got an appointment coming up here, another appointment in a few minutes. So
absolutely,
it's okay. Well, it's been great.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you.
Well, guys, I appreciate you bringing me on. I appreciate your kind words. You asked some great questions, and I thought it was a pretty engaging conversation. So,
yeah,
as you guys pointed out, the bottom line is we just don't know. I mean, this is all speculation. These are iconic mysteries that have been with us forever. May be gone, maybe still going on long after we're gone. I hate to say it. I'd like to see some of them solved. But it's just good that people will at least keep their minds open and consider the possibility that there are things happening in our world, in our universe, that we just don't know and we just don't understand yet. They're great mysteries, and there's nothing wrong with searching for answers.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Like I said, I've been an admirer of your work, and
because it's very no nonsense, straight to the point. Let's stick to the facts, and that's one of the things that we talk about when we referenced the 411 books. That I have to say that David Paulides, that that's the style of how he wrote that book, and that's why I like your work, and I like his books.
Ken, one thing you don't do, you don't go out there and just because you didn't find something, you don't go, well, I'm just going to make it something, because you see that a lot of times, especially with ghost hunters. They're just like, did you hear that? Oh, that was it, and you're not doing that. But you're also not going out there and trying to just debunk everything. You're just a very pragmatist type person, in my opinion. You appear to be very no-nonsense pragmatist.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think I appreciate that one of the hardest things for any human to do, is to separate our critical and analytical mind from our emotional mind. And these, as I said at the beginning, these topics touch us humans on a very primordial, we connect with these in certain ways. And for many people, there are emotional needs and biases that unfortunately will, skew their perception or as you said, they've got to experience something. It's not like they can go out in the woods. I don't mind going out in the woods for hours and hours and not experiencing anything, because I just love being in the woods. So it's like, if I don't see a Dogman or a Bigfoot, I still had a good time. But, I just hope people will keep it real, think critically, question things, research, don't jump to conclusions, and, just be interested in the subject matter. It's very cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
That being said, we're going to let you go, man, so you can get on with your day. I appreciate your time, Ken.
Appreciate you guys. And again, The Essential Guide to Bigfoot. My new book will be out here in the next couple of weeks. It'll be on Amazon, and people can also contact me. People can contact me via social media if they want a signed copy.
Oh man, That's awesome. We'd love a signed copy.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Well, if nothing else,
guys.
next time you have your local conference in the state of Texas, whatever we're able to make it, I'll have my copy in hand, and I'll, you can sign it.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to.
That'd be awesome.
It'd be an honor. Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate
it,
Ken. We'll let you go.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
You
Thanks
too,
to everyone
you
who listened in. All righty.
Bye.
Bye.